What's good, Rip City? Brendan Slaughter here for the Rip City Drive. Early reports are that Seattle Seahawks will not franchise Super Bowl MVP running back Kenneth Walker. Walker's set to become an unrestricted free agent, and the Seahawks and general manager John Snyder have just used the franchise tag twice in their time together. What happens with Kenneth Walker Kenneth Walker will be key to watch moving forward. Portland Trailblazers are back in action on Friday out of the All-Star break, hosting Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. I'll have Blazers game day starting at 5 o'clock from Moda Center. Make sure to tune in for that. Coming up on the big show today, we got a jam-packed 3 hours for you guys. Awesome guests. Keith Smith from Spotrac in the front office show at 3:20. Ryan Harlan from Beaver's Edge at 4:20. And then Trailblazers studio and radio analyst Michael Holton in studio at 5:20. You've got the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter on a Tuesday. Good afternoon, Rip City and beyond. Welcome into the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon. A Tuesday afternoon where it can't quite decide what it wants to do outside, folks. It seems like it's been sunny one moment, pouring down rain the next. Just welcome to another day in Oregon Spring. And you might be saying, Brendan, it's February, Oregon Spring. Nah, folks, I'm just choosing to believe the groundhog was wrong. We were going to get spring early this year. And I say this on the morning that we even had a snow threat, but you know what? I'm not buying it. I think it's going to get warmer, and I think we're going to have ourselves an early spring this year. Again, welcome into the Rip City Drive. Hope everyone is having a great Tuesday so far. Got to start off with the news that I just mentioned in the update, and that was kind of the big, quote, sports story of today. Then we're going to kind of dive into everything else, but just right off the cuff, they were even talking about it on ESPN right before we jumped on, and that was the expectations that the Seattle Seahawks are not going to franchise tag Kenny Walker. And, Super Bowl MVP, Kenny Walker, I mean, you're talking about a guy who was absolutely crucial to what the Seahawks did this year. And, there are some, who may think that, Jason Myers deserved the Super Bowl MVP for his efforts leading the Seahawks with his field goals, but it was indeed Kenny Walker, and he played a great game, and he was big for the Seahawks in the postseason, and he's been big for him for a handful of years now, but the reality is he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. The Hawks' choice was to come up with a new deal that, based on this, he's very likely to get a lot of suitors, maybe have somebody with cap space throw a pretty good amount of money at him, which that's just the reality of the beast, right? And the Seahawks are going to have raises due for a lot of guys. That's the reality of winning a Super Bowl, too. But I just wanted to say, too, I was extremely impressed with Kenny Walker this offseason. If you've listened to me and known I'm not, a big diehard Seahawk or anything like that, respect him from afar for sure, but not nearly, bleeding blue and green quite like some other family members of mine, but massive respect for what the Seahawks did this season and how they were able to win the Super Bowl, and more importantly, how big Kenny Walker was for them. So that'll be something I'll be curious about. And I was also genuinely not shocked, but surprised to know that the franchise tag is typically not something that Seattle does. Typically not something that they've done under John Schneider just twice in their long, illustrious time together. So entirely possible. Perhaps the Seahawks are looking to move on and bring in somebody else, and maybe Zach Charbonnet out of his injury is the featured guy next year, and they're going to draft somebody. There's lots of ways they could go with it, but nevertheless, this looks to me like Kenny Walker is headed for a big-time payday. He wasn't, was the end of a rookie deal, wasn't making a ton of money this year, so if he does, definitely well-deserved for the Super Bowl MVP. But that's pretty much it on the Seahawks side of things. We've got an awesome show on hand for you guys today. First up, coming up at 3:20, we're going to catch up with Keith Smith from the front office show and Spotrac, talk some NBA and some Blazers. It's obviously the All-Star break right now. We're keeping our eyes peeled for the start of the second half. And we say second half when it's really not half. There's only 26 games left for your Portland Trailblazers. But one of them starts Friday night at Moda Center against the Denver Nuggets. I will be there. Blazers game day. Make sure you tune in. Should be an awesome matchup with Nikola Jokic in Denver. Obviously, the Blazers were able to get the best of Denver earlier this season. So I'm excited to see another matchup with Jokic and company. So that should be a good game. And again, the Blazers going to be playing some of their best basketball, I think, post All-Star break. So a lot of excitement there. Curious to get Keith's thoughts on the Trailblazers, where they stand at the break, his thoughts on Dame winning the three-point contest, and don't worry, folks, we're going to get to that because that pretty much made my weekend. Donovan Clingan and Young Hansen and the Rising Stars, and of course, Denny Avdia in the All-Star game. We'll hear from him here in just a little bit as well. And then at 4:20, we'll be switching gears and talking some Oregon State with Beaver's Edge senior writer Ryan Harlan from Oregon State's On3 site, Beaver's Edge. We're talking the latest with Beaver Baseball, which got their season kicked off over the weekend. We'll also be talking some football. If you can believe it, spring football less than a month away as the Beavers under new head coach Jamarcus Shepard will be hitting the gridiron, getting things rocking and rolling. We'll also talk a little schedule as the Beavers finally got their 2026 football schedule just in the last few days. We'll break that down a little bit later in the show as well, in addition with Ryan. And then finally, at 5:20, we're going to have Michael Holton in studio, Trailblazers studio and radio analyst Michael Holton. And I'm very excited to catch up with Holton on Hoops, talk a little bit of everything because say what you will, but, I know the Blazers didn't necessarily or Denny, I should say, didn't exactly, light up the scoreboard during the All-Star game itself. But I have to say, the weekend certainly had a lot of Trailblazers representation, and I think that's pretty awesome. I mean, you think about Donovan Clingan, Young Hansen, and the Rising Stars getting their absolute due, and then you move over to Dame, which, if you didn't get a chance to watch that, folks, I'm sure the whole contest is now available on, Peacock, YouTube, whatever it is. If you didn't get a chance to see the three-point contest, and I'll give you some grace because it caught me by surprise too, the NBA kind of switching some things up a little bit format-wise, and the three-point contest started about 2:15. So as I was working through some of my other stuff on Saturday, Oregon State-related, the Beavers had a couple games going that day. I was, talking to my brother, and I was like, hey, the three-point contest is going to start soon. He's like, really? It's not like at 7 o'clock? And we were kind of talking about the uniqueness of that, and I'm like, hey, I'm genuinely curious to see Dame because it's almost kind of like I have like a need, right? I need my Dame fix, right? We're talking all about Dame and all this next season, and that's totally how it's going to be and all that. But, you look at Dame, and when he announced he was going to be in the three-point contest, I had so many different waves of emotion. On one hand, you have the wave of emotion of like, wow, okay, so they're like the recovery's going like really, really well. If he's going to go out there and play in the three-point contest, and then you start getting a little overexcited, as I definitely did for a minute, and then I'm like, okay, I want to see this guy shoot, and then on the other side, you're like, okay, is he ready? Like, is this? And of course, Dame knows he's ready, but I think that goes through the minds of anybody when you're coming off an injury like Dame that was an Achilles and so significant. So I'm sitting there watching, I'm like, okay, it's going to be really, really cool to see Dame not only in a Blazer jersey again, but see Dame being Dame, nailing threes, hitting the logo shot that basically he and Curry patented. I mean, all the above, right? So three-point contest gets underway and what have you, and instantaneously I tune in and, Dame is the last guy to go out of the entire field. And I tuned in right away just in time for Con Knuppel to, kind of kick things off. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching all these guys go. And right away, of the field, Devin Booker, Con, Dame, obviously, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, Jamal Murray, Bobby Portis, and then former Blazers legend Norman Powell. Looking at the field, I touched my brother and I'm like, if Dame's got it, I see Dame, Con, and maybe, I was thinking more Maxey. Turned out to be Devin Booker, who was the guy that was there. But nevertheless, just seeing how comfortable it looked. Like, I know it's a shooting motion. I know you're not dribbling around hard screens and all the things that go into, a daily NBA game. But sitting there watching Dame effortlessly still have his shot, effortlessly still hit those logo shots, effortlessly, hit 5 in a row, whatever it was. It was like jumping back into a time machine and watching the Dame that, took all of our hearts here in Portland. And I think it was just awesome that he was, A, healthy enough in a place to do that, B, no setbacks. You don't think that way, but just even the cynicist in me is like, let's see Dame get through this, and no, nothing goes wrong, right? And obviously it didn't, and that's awesome. But just kind of you wanted to see that, and then two, seeing Damian Lillard back in a Trailblazers jersey, folks, and then winning this contest in a Trailblazers jersey. That's just something that you can't underscore. And I think, you talk about kind of, I like to call it the wilderness years, the last few years around Trailblazers basketball, where there was focused on a lot of growth, a lot of rebuilding, a lot of retooling, development. And because of that, there were growing pains. There were some rough seasons, some rough results. Now that, coming into this year, we all kind of knew that the Blazers weren't going to be in that situation, and hence where they are right now, firmly in the play-in field, most likely, and I would say very confidently going to speculate they're going to make the play-in and all that. Maybe they can even get higher. We'll get to that a little bit later as well. But I think Dame being there in that three-point contest, having that Trailblazers jersey on, I think it's an awesome thing for, fans that maybe are coming back to the team a little bit this year after, like I said, a couple tougher years, and maybe some guys becoming a little bit less casual and kind of more hardcore again. And when you see like Dame back in his jersey nailing threes, my mind, folks, instantly went to next year. And that's not to discount the great, great work that this team has done this year, because I think when you look at where the Blazers are and what they can accomplish over these final 26 games, they can still make some noise. And they could even, I've said before, I think pushing out of the play-in would be tough, but I don't list it as impossible either. Could this Trailblazers team make it in the 6th spot? I don't know if it's likely, but it's certainly not impossible, especially having the easiest schedule in the entire NBA the rest of the way. But back to the three-point contest. Obviously, Dame showed up, did his thing, and not surprisingly, it was Devin Booker, Khan, and Damian Lillard in the championship contest, or in championship round. Not so surprising. My brother and I are settling in. I'm like, okay, this is where I think the rookie is probably, going to learn a little lesson for next time. And, Khan obviously doesn't have quite as good of a showing as he did in the first round. That opens the door for Dame. Dame goes number 2 in this round. He finishes with 29 points. Devin Booker, and this is where I got to say, Dame won this contest, folks. Make no mistake. But Devin Booker may have equally lost it. And again, I would highly encourage everyone to check it out. My brother and I are on the edge of our seat as we're sitting there watching this game. We knew Dame had his 29. We knew Booker couldn't, he could tie 29, and that would have a cool, kind of third final round, if you will, that I've actually never seen. But in terms of Dame and Booker, Booker's sitting there, he's starting to heat up. And right, like Booker started hot. He moved to the kind of the top of the three-point line, cooled down a little bit. And then I start looking at my brother when I think he made 4 or 5 in a row, and I'm like, uh-oh. And then he moves to his final rack in the short corner, and it's all money balls. And Devin Booker, again, nothing against Dame. If Devin Booker takes care of business, this is his three-point championship. Devin Booker, I dare say, kind of wilted a little bit when it mattered most, and he couldn't hit that shot to be able to ultimately tie Dame or beat Dame and take the win in the three-point contest. So it was Damian Lillard getting the 29 points, winning the championship round over Devin Booker's 27 points. And Dame, third-time three-point contest champion winner. He joins Larry Bird and Craig Hodges. Talk about elite company, folks, as the only players to win it 3 times. Not Clay, not Steph, not Ray Allen, not Reggie Miller. Yeah, Dame, Larry Bird, and Craig Hodges. And guess what, folks? Dame said afterwards he wants to go back and win it for a 4th time and be the guy next year. Pretty darn cool, if you ask me. All right, folks, that's our first break coming up here on the Rip City Drive. But don't worry, we are just getting started with the fun here on the drive. When we come back, we'll be catching up with Keith Smith from Spotrac, talking everything Blazers, NBA. Want to get his thoughts on the three-point contest and all that as well. Much, much more to come here on the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon. Brendan Slaughter here with you. Pleased to welcome back to the program, friend of the show, Keith Smith, covering the NBA for the Front Office Show and Spotrac. Keith, happy All-Star break to you. Glad we're able to catch up again. How are things?
Everything's going well. Yeah, we only got a couple more days left until we're right back to it. I'm excited to get back to the routine of games and all that again.
Oh, most definitely. It was nice to have, an interesting All-Star break, and I say that, Keith, because, just with nature being busy, I actually caught myself being like, oh, wow, the three-point contest and everything starts at 2 o'clock, which was such a, for us here on the West Coast, obviously, it was such a departure from what, we kind of had expected previously late at night, and just kind of want to start as a whole. Kind of what are your kind of some big takeaways you have from the NBA as we sit at the All-Star break?
Yeah, All-Star weekend on the whole was a success. I think the game itself being broken up into the shortened mid-game format in the tournament, I think that did really well. The players were into it. They were competitive. They were getting after it. That was all great to see. And then I think when we talk about All-Star Saturday night, the dunk contest, at this point, it kind of is what it is. I don't know how much more is left to do with that event. I see everything cool to see Damian Lillard out there, to see him win. That's great. And, all around, I think the NBA is happy with that. You pick one team about the rest of the way to win the title, but that's a lot less certain than it was maybe as soon as, a month or two ago. And a lot of other teams have surfaced as real contenders.
Catching up with Keith Smith here on the Rip City Drive. Just a couple questions for you, Keith. Appreciate your time. Shifting gears to the All-Star weekend itself and how it relates to us, here in Portland, it was obviously, a big weekend with Donovan Clingan, Young Hansen, and the Rising Stars. Dame returning to the three-point contest, and then Denny being an All-Star himself. Let's just start with Dame. I mean, how cool was that to see him back out there after the Achilles injury, coming back to Portland, wearing that Blazer jersey, and ultimately winning the darn thing?
Yeah, just seeing him in the Blazers jersey. Yeah.
Okay, folks, I think we were having some technical difficulties with Keith Smith here on the Rip City Drive. We'll see if we can get Keith back on, but nevertheless, back to, our point itself, and that was, that the Portland Trailblazers absolutely showed out at the NBA All-Star break and, had some big-time performances. We'll see if we can attempt to get Keith back on. But in the interim, let's go ahead and hear from Denny Avdia following the All-Star game where he played for Team World in a pair of games.
Sean. Denny, with this being your first All-Star experience, was it important to you to have it be a kind of more of a competitive game, given some of the criticisms about the All-Star game the past few years?
For sure. I think it was competitive. People really brought, their effort and tried to play it hard. Some players took more shots than others, so, can't really control that. But, you're just out there trying to compete, we don't play together all the time, so we're trying to figure each other out. But we tried. Yeah, it was fun.
Denny, do you think the world format brought out more from you guys in terms of just bringing more juice than normal?
I think it brought more from the Stripes, actually. they were going at it. So, I think it brought some competitiveness with it, and it's a fun format, and it shows how the game went global, which is amazing to see. And I hope it's even gonna expand and people about to understand it. So fun watching the All-Star game. It's gonna be a little bit more competitive. Yeah, try to bring it back.
Sorry, Joe on the left.
Denny, you said it over here, other way. There you go.
Oh,
there you go.
There you go. You're hiding.
Yeah. You said it was a long weekend, but now reflecting back on the 3 days, did the experience live up to your expectations? Can you just elaborate on the highlights and what you enjoyed?
Yeah, just all the obligations you have to do, whether it's your shoe brand, your fans, the NBA itself. It's just fun to be around this league, these people, great staff all around, great planning of the All-Star weekend. It was hectic, but it was fun. I was really enjoying just the experience, especially when it's your first time. You embrace everything a little better. But I hope I can be here for many years to come. And yeah, it wasn't so bad.
Ramona, back right.
Hi. Denny, was Victor really as competitive as it seemed like? And we saw the block there.
Yeah.
We saw him get mad at the lack of defensive rotation towards the end of the game there. What was he really like in there?
We kind of saw Victor was really competitive, so we just try to give him the ball and like go to work, man. Like it's because we saw he was really into it. So I mean, we're just there. We were just there for each other, honestly. And Victor was cooking. He was playing good. So just feed him the ball. It was fun.
Then you said like this game brought out the juice in everybody.
All right, that was Portland Trailblazers forward Denny Avdia following the All-Star game, and I think we have Keith Smith back on the line. We're going to see if we can get a better connection this time. Keith, are you there, my good friend?
I am there. Hopefully you can hear me better now.
All right. No, good to hear, Keith. Good to hear. And just to kind of reset the stage, I think we were talking Dame. Let's just start there. How cool was it to see, Dame back out there following the injury, not only to go out and, compete and look good, but win the darn thing. And then for us here, winning it in a Portland jersey, it was pretty cool. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, just seeing Dame in the Blazers jersey just looked right?
Yeah.
That's just what it's supposed to be. It was really cool to see him. I loved his comments about, hey, I've been working hard. I need to compete. Like, he needed something to, I think, look forward to. When these guys who go through these year-long rehabs talk about it can be really lonely. And you start to wonder, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? So I think having this for him to kind of gear up for was probably huge for him, mentally and physically to get there. And then to watch him go out there and win it, really cool too. So I know some people had a couple issues with like, hey, he hasn't even played. Why not put somebody else in there? But at the end of the day, it's an exhibition type thing. Let's have a little bit of fun with it. And he clearly showed, hey, I certainly deserve to be here by going out and winning it.
Oh, for sure. And just to kind of add on to that too, I mean, you were, before we got disconnected earlier, we were kind of talking about, the dunk contest, and you mentioned, it is kind of what it is. And I think that kind of sums it up. Like, to be point blank, Keith, like I was excited for the 3-point contest, not only because of Dame, but because of, a player like Knipple too, who I've really fallen, in love with his game from afar this year. Devin Booker, lots of, well-known 3-point shooters. And then I'm like looking over at the dunk contest field, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, but it's not the household names like it even was when I was a kid. It's just different now.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you can't get any of the big names to do it. Jaylen Brown did it a couple years ago,
right,
and then took no shortage of flack because he didn't perform all that great in it. And I think that's why none of the big names want to do it, because we're just kind of the point where I think we've kind of seen these guys, do everything, unless we're going to start talking about, backflips and more gymnastics involved and, some kind of crazy things, which at that point, let's just go out and get people. There's probably 40 or 50 people out there who this is what they do is dunk contests. Just have them do it. I don't know why we were making the players get out there and do it. And the worst thing that could have happened was when Jace Richardson fell. It for a moment there was very scary. It looked like he might have been hurt. If that had happened, I think that would have been the end of it. We're not already closing in on the end of it anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I might be longing for the days of old, Keith, but I'm like, can we just see someone else jump over a Kia? Like Blake Griffin?
Yeah.
I remember that quite well. And to your point, it certainly has changed quite a bit. Catching up with Keith Smith here on the Rip City Drive. I mean, going back just to the 3-point contest itself, Keith, and the fact that, Dame was able to win and all that, just as far as a legacy goes, right? Like you might think, 10, 15 years down the line, you're like, hey, who do you think's probably won the most 3-point contests? And a casual fan might be like, oh, Steph Curry, maybe Klay Thompson. But no, it's Dame and Larry Bird and Craig Hodges with 3, and Dame's already said he wants to go back next year and try to take it to a 4th. I mean, that's kind of a cool thing for Dame's legacy point, I think, just looking at it from afar.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it was, one of those things now that just goes, it goes on his ledger as something that he accomplished. And I think that's huge. I mean, clearly he's a great player on the court, in regular competition as well. He's going to go down as, one of the, I believe he was named top 75, and, that'll, be something that'll be there for him, for a good long time as well. So, I mean, just a tremendous player, and it's cool that, the story isn't finished being written yet, right? He's going to return to the court next season. We'll see, what it looks like. It's a team that's on the rise, and things like this just add to his, legacy and legend. And the fact that he was able to do all this in a uniform again is just an even cooler part of the story.
Oh, it 100% is. Again, catching up with Keith Smith here. And yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of to that point, Keith, obviously, I watched that and instantly in my, kind of nearsightedness, I'm like, oh man, Dame looks great, man. Like, can we get him back on the court? And obviously we know, he's not going to play this year. He's coming back next year. But just, Keith, with what you know about this Trailblazer team, what we've seen, it looks like they're going to be with this, Danny Avdia, Tumani Kamara, Donovan Clingan, grouping of guys. When you can add a guy who very clearly still has a crazy good three-point stroke, I mean, that kind of seems to be a little bit of what Portland's missing right now.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, they went out and made, I think, one of the more underrated or at least less talked about trades during trade season to get Vit Krejci just to shore up their three-point shooting. And as I put it, when I've broken down that trade, is they shoot a lot, they just don't make a lot. This year, and they're in a spot where that's what they need. Is just more shooting, and I think Dame will help with that. I think having Scoot Henderson back is just another creator that they have on the team to kind of be able to help things. Guys get good looks and the like. Those things are all going to be big for them as they try to gear up here to make some noise in the play-in tournament and in the second half of this season.
Absolutely, and that's a great transition to our next thought, Keith. And obviously, I know you covered player movement as well as anybody in the NBA. Again, check out Keith Smith, Keith Smith NBA on X. But I'm curious your thoughts on Vit Krejci, because I kind of agree. It was a typical, and I mean this in like the best way, like a Joe Cronin type move, which is, very low risk but high upside. And, you look at the exchanging a player in Duop Reith that wasn't going to contribute anymore this year, and a couple second-round picks, which we know what they are, for a guy who is tall, can handle the ball, can shoot well. I mean, what do you like about Vit Krejci?
Yeah, he's a good player, and as this roster gets more expensive, especially starting with next season when Shaedon Sharpe's new contract kicks in, and then you've got Tumani Kamara's new contract kicks in, and those are pretty big raises for both those guys. They're going to be in a position where they need that, right? They need that kind of cheap production on these team-friendly minimum-type deals, and that's exactly what you're getting in Vit Krejci. This is a guy who can play. He can be a rotation player and fill a real need for this team because of the things that he can do. So I think this is a really good, sharp pickup for the Blazers, for, like you said, for a guy who's just not going to be a part of it. And that roster is pretty full, too. So even asking second-round picks to crack through and make the roster is a big ask for that back end of it as well.
Were you surprised at all that the Blazers maybe didn't move one of their veterans at all during the trade deadline?
Not really. I thought maybe Rob Williams or Matisse Thybulle might be moved if for no other reason than to create a roster spot for guys like C.D. Sissoko or Caleb Love.
Right.
That seemed to be something that they needed to do, but they didn't end up doing that. That's not to say that couldn't still happen through other ways here in the second half, or we call it the second half, but final third of the season, really. So we'll see how that comes. But I didn't think they were going to be in position to make a major kind of trade with Jeremy Grant or anybody like that. That just didn't seem to be on the table just yet.
Sure. Catching up with Keith Smith here on the Rip City Drive. Keith, appreciate your time. Just a couple more questions for you. And you kind of mentioned, obviously, it's kind of universally referred to as the second half. And teams have, a rough amount of games, but it's not half. It's for Portland, for example, they got 26 games left. And I'm just kind of curious for you, when you kind of look at it and looking at Portland's schedule, Portland has the easiest strength of schedule the rest of the way, Keith. How much can the Blazers kind of bank on that as they want to, kind of rise up and see if they can kind of put a push for Phoenix or Golden State for that 6th or 7th spot, or 7th or 8th spot, excuse me?
Yeah, I think that's huge for them. And, one of the things that it's not to go down this rabbit hole, but tanking's been obviously a major topic of conversation. But for a team like Portland, this is where they almost benefit, because what you'll see is now they're going to get to play some of those teams that are tanking. And those wins that might have been a lot more difficult to come by in the second half of the season are now maybe going to look a little easier. So that's, a good place for them to be in. I think a lot for them, too, beyond just the easier schedule, it's going to be health related, right? They need to get and keep their guys on the floor, especially their ball handlers. Drew Holiday, Scoot Henderson, those guys missed a lot of time in the first part of the year. And Denny Avdia has had a really great breakout year as far as being a playmaker, but everybody on that roster will benefit from having Henderson and Holiday healthy here down the stretch, just because they're guys who can handle the ball and make plays for others.
Definitely. Catching up here with Keith Smith from the Front Office Show and Spotrac. Kind of a more big picture question, Keith, because I think there's kind of been, some differing opinions here in Rip City. And I've kind of seen both sides where there's, maybe there's the benefit towards, pushing to get in, not just the play-in, but try to get that 7 or 8 spot, even though you might have to face a very tough Oklahoma City team or San Antonio team just to get that playoff experience versus, trying to maybe get in the play-in and maybe you don't, and then you end up back in the lottery. My question to you is, if the way I see it is, I think it would be a benefit not only to see the Blazers get in at like 7 or 8 and just take that playoff experience, but Keith, am I thinking too far ahead to be like, if that happens, the Blazers could finally get that Chicago pick monkey off their back?
No, that's true too. So that thing has been hanging out there for a good long time now. So I'm with you with that one. That's almost a side benefit. But yeah, I think for Portland, where they're at in kind of their arc as a team with the way they're structured right now, it would absolutely benefit them to make the postseason and ideally make the actual playoffs as well. And they're certainly going to make the play-in tournament, no question about that. So now it's getting into the playoffs themselves would be really good, because I think what we would be looking at for the Blazers is being in a situation where they can kind of get in there and get that experience, and then you use that as a springboard for next year. Like, I think about the Detroit Pistons. They went from being a god-awful team to a team that was a really fun surprise, made the playoffs, played really well in the first round, and then they've used that to springboard themselves into this much bigger part of the conversation. Is that I don't know how many people realize, because we're all caught up in the Thunder.
Sure.
The Pistons have the best record in the NBA at the All-Star break. So if you're Portland, I think that's what you're looking for, right? Get some of these young guys their first taste of playoff action, or at least their first taste of playoff action as like major components of a team, and I think that would be really big for them.
Last thing from me, Keith. Again, Keith Smith from the Front Office Show and Spotrac. Really appreciate your time, Keith. Just overall, how would you kind of assess how Tiago Splitter has done leading the Blazers to where they are now, just a couple games under 500 at the break, considering all the off-the-court stuff, all the injuries, and just, where he kind of thought he would be entering Game 1 versus where he's at now with 26 left?
Yeah, obviously, right. Really tough spot to be put in, to be told, hey, guess what? You're the head coach now. Good luck. That's just not easy on anybody. That's not easy on him. It's not easy on the rest of the staff. It's not easy on the players. But I think he's done a really, really good job with this team. And it's been, you can see, I think he has them together, which is huge and important. He's got them playing pretty good basketball. And I think a lot of the time when they have struggled, it's been those games where it is, all right, our best ball handler is Denny Avdia, not bad. Our second best ball handler is, I don't really know, because I'm just going to kind of make it up on the fly, because, guys have been out, whether it's Jeremy Grant, who could, step into that role, or like I said before, the guards with Holiday and Henderson there, and then it's, the usage of the two-way players and getting some of the best two-way production out of those guys has been huge, and plays pretty hard most nights. I think, it's a lot to do with even adding Krejci. There's still not a lot of shooting there, but I think maybe that comes back around here. But I think he's done a wonderful job kind of getting them to play to their strengths, playing hard and staying together throughout all of this.
He is Keith Smith, folks, my number one and go-to source for NBA analysis. Keith, I love having you on the program. Really appreciate the time. Thanks for fighting through the technical specs with me, and you are the man, Keith. I look forward to next time we get a chance to talk.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Keith Smith from the Front Office Show and Spotrac. You know, I always love to get the national opinion, folks. And, you know, it's nice to see over a couple years because, you know, the Blazers haven't necessarily given a ton of national peaking headlines the last few years. And then I talked about coming into this year, how this year was going to feel different. And it certainly has. And I've had a lot of fun, you know, covering this team this year so far. And obviously we got 26 games left. And what kind of a move are the Blazers going to make? And like Keith said, I agree. I think, you know, you go, you get the experience. So what if you get, you know, tuned up by the Thunder or the Spurs? And I think the Spurs would be a better matchup. But still, maybe the Blazers get 4-1 or whatever. But I think that playoff experience combined with just kind of a hand-washing situation with Chicago, free up the future first-round picks. I'm here for it, folks. All right, we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up the first hour, getting you guys ready for hour number 2. Brendan Slaughter on the Rip City Drive. Keep it locked. Welcoming you back into the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter here on a Tuesday afternoon. Hope everyone is having a great Tuesday so far, enjoying the nice, semi-sunny, semi-cloudy, semi-rainy day here in the Pacific Northwest. Big shout out to Keith Smith for joining us last segment. It was great to catch up with Keith and kind of get the national narrative on the Portland Trailblazers, folks, because I really do think they're going to be able to do something in this final stretch of games. We mentioned they have 26 games left. They have the easiest schedule in the NBA the rest of the way. And like he said, if this team can be healthy, and I think that's still a big if, right? We're getting guys back and what have you, but the dreaded, potential injury too. So I think Portland being able to get back, he mentioned Drew Holiday staying healthy, Scoot Henderson staying healthy. Maybe, it's hard to know what if the Blazers, what the status is of a guy like Chris Murray, potentially, a guy like Matisse Thybulle, but otherwise, Blazers are in a pretty good spot. I mean, everyone's kind of getting back to where they need to be. They're getting to a level of health, and now I think it's really exciting to kind of see what they're going to do down the stretch run of the season, I should say. And let's go ahead and take a quick look at what's coming up for the Portland Trailblazers here on the docket. Coming out of the All-Star break, the Trailblazers, as we mentioned, top of the show, will be hosting Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. That is Friday. I'll have Blazers game day at 5 o'clock in addition to hosting the fifth quarter, filling in for Chris Burkhardt that day. So make sure to tune in. Should be an awesome little soiree at Moda Center that night. I'm certainly excited for that matchup, and it's a big one, right? So Portland obviously hasn't played since their win against the Jazz on February 12th. That's, outside of Donovan Clingan and Young Hansen and then Denny Avdia, who, all took part in All-Star weekend activities. Counting Dame out of that equation because Dame's not really working into this year's equation for the Trailblazers in terms of playing on the court. So you circle back, most everyone got a nice, long, extended break. It's a tough matchup with Denver, to be sure. It's never easy to play Denver. But the good news is Portland's already beaten them once this year. It was a 109-107 thriller back at Moda Center earlier this year. And when I say earlier this year, that was back on Halloween night when the Blazers took down Denver. And we'll see. Blazers come home to Moda Center for just one game against Denver. They go on a one-game road trip to Phoenix, come back for one against Minnesota, and then go on a long 5-game road trip. So a bit of an interesting schedule quirk here coming out of the All-Star break, but nevertheless, we'll be breaking it all down here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll be getting you guys ready for the 4 o'clock hour, switching gears a little bit, talking some Oregon State. Oregon State released their 2026 football schedule not too long ago. We'll be breaking that down at 4 o'clock. We'll also talk a little Oregon State baseball with Ryan Harlan at 4:20. Much, much more to come here on the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter. franchise tag. Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker. Walker is set to become an unrestricted free agent. Like Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker. Walker is set to become an unrestricted free agent, and the Seahawks and John Schneider have just used the franchise tag twice in their illustrious history, so something to keep an eye on there for certain. Portland Trailblazers return to action on Friday out of the All-Star break, hosting Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. I'll have Blazers game day starting at 5 o'clock from Moda Center, filling in for Chris Burkhart. Coming up on the big show, excited to start the second hour of the show. We got Ryan Harlan from Beaver's Edge coming up, in addition to Michael Holton from the Trailblazers in studio at 5:20. You've got the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter here on a Tuesday. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon, 4 o'clock hour. Brendan Slaughter here with you guys. Hope everyone is having a great Tuesday so far. Lots to get into. We're going to kind of get you guys ready for our conversation with Ryan Harlan coming up here in just about 18 minutes, as we're going to be catching up with the senior writer for BeaversEdge.com, talking all things Oregon State. Beavers recently dropped their 2026 football schedule. The Oregon State baseball team is underway and has kicked off the start of their 2026 campaign, 3-1 after their first weekend of play. So excited to talk a little bit about that with Ryan as well. Much more to come with Ryan. So that should be a good conversation. And then a little bit later, very excited to have the Trailblazers studio and radio analyst Michael Holton joining me here in studio at 5:20. Should be a great conversation with Michael, talking all things Blazers. Much to get into here on the Rip City Drive, but before we do, let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit and talk some Oregon State football. And obviously that was the release of Oregon State's 2026 schedule, and this came last week, and first time I've had a chance to break it down for you guys here on 620 Rip City Radio. For the latest on the Beavs, make sure you stay locked into BeaversEdge.com, as that's my other gig, and definitely a go-to source for all Trailblazers, all Beavers coverage. See, folks, I got all these teams on my mind now. But no, the Beavers coverage at BeaversEdge.com, it's some of the best. Check it out. We'll be talking with Ryan here momentarily. But, man, right off the cuff, Oregon State's 2026 football schedule, in a word, tough. And I don't even know which way to describe it beyond that, because it's tough. You look right off the bat, Oregon State's going to open at Houston. Likely a team that's going to be on the edge of the top 25, if not in it. Obviously, with Willie Fritz, they won 9 games this last year. It's a pretty good game with Oregon State at Reser Stadium before the Beavers ultimately fell in overtime. But a tough way to open the year on the road against a top-quality opponent in Houston. The road won't get easier. The Beavers welcome in Texas Tech. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably a top 10 team coming into Reser, if not top 15. This will be one of the biggest games, Reser Stadium non-conference, in a really long time. Simply put, I don't know how often this type of game will happen in the far future, as far as Power 4, Power 5 teams and what have you. And Texas Tech coming to Reser Stadium is going to be huge, but nevertheless a very difficult game for Oregon State. Following that, which again I think reasonably, I think an 0-2 start is probably what you pencil in now. Maybe you get lucky against Houston and things break right. But we're talking the first year of Jamarcus Shepard with a brand new staff, program, the whole ball of wax. So to be determined on what we can expect from that group. They come home and play Montana, which is certainly not an FCS cupcake by any means. That's a tough FCS squad, a new coach coming in, but nevertheless still a challenging game. A September 26th matchup with the UTEP Miners. Again, historically, UTEP, not the greatest football team. You like Oregon State's odds in that to round out their non-conference play, but nevertheless still a road game, and something Oregon State's going to have to prove they can, take care of after being pretty rough on the road the last couple of years. They continue on the road to start conference play at Colorado State on October 3rd. Jim Mora Jr., new head man there. Obviously, he was linked to the Beaver job for a minute as well. That's a tough place to play. The Beavers have only played there once and kind of got throttled by Colorado State back in 2017 when they opened that new stadium. But that'll be an interesting game between two teams that want to start off 1-0 and two teams that were not great this last year and finished 2-10 on the year. So that's an opportunity for the Beavers on the road. They come home, San Diego State, Washington State in back-to-back weeks. San Diego State won 9 games a year ago. Sean Lewis got that program rolling. That's going to be a tough game. No way to slice it for the Beavs, but a winnable one at that. Washington State, same kind of thing. Washington State went 7-6 this last year, working in a new coach in Kirby Moore, but talent to build from, right? And I think that's another tough game for Oregon State. They take a bye on October 24th, then have a flex, their first flex game. It can be either October 30th or October 31st down at Fresno State, and that is a really tough place to play. Obviously, Oregon State got the win there a couple years back. I very famously remember Jack Coletto with the walk-off score, but Fresno is as intimidating as it gets, and that's a tough matchup. Matt Entz and his squad obviously very famously beat the Beavers and Reeser this last year by a comedy of special teams errors on the Oregon State side, so Oregon State likely to be a little extra juiced up for that one, but a good matchup, and I'm going to say that's a really tough game. Beavers will come home on November 7th to face off with Texas State. First ever matchup with the Bobcats, who are new to the Pac-12 Conference. Excited to see that matchup. Texas State went 6-7 this last year. Again, not a pushover. Another one of those 50-50 games for Oregon State. November 14th, they go to Boise State. I don't love this matchup. I don't love the time. I don't love where it is. I don't love that they didn't get Boise at home. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. And, getting Boise, would I'd rather have played Boise if I was Oregon State October 3rd or October 10th as opposed to November 14th? Yeah, for sure. That's going to be a cold game, tough environment. Historically, Oregon State has struggled down there on the blue. That's a tough matchup, and I think it will be again this year with Spencer Danielson's squad expected to be good once again. Beavers' home finale will be against Utah State. Bronco Mendenhall coming to town. The Aggies were also a 500 team this last year, went to a bowl game, finished 6-7. So again, another one of those 50-50 potentially tough matchups. Followed by the final week of the regular season, which is considered the flex, which one of the unique quirks of the Pac-12 schedule this year is that the final week of the regular season for all the new Pac-12 teams is a game that can be decided as late as a week before. So as of right now, that's projected to be an Oregon State at Washington State game. Washington State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and Utah State have guaranteed home games in that matchup. Now, as I look at this, they can flex things around based on what's best for the conference. Washington State, Fresno, Colorado State, and Utah State, as I mentioned, have the guaranteed home games. It says here, further considerations will be taken into account should any flex occur with the projected matchups, including no team returning to the same venue twice during the regular season. So considering that Fresno and Colorado State are also guaranteed home games this week, that really only leaves this game potentially flexed out to be, if it's not Oregon State, Washington State, Oregon State, Utah State, which would be basically a back-to-back as the Beavers played Utah State the week before. So I don't exactly know how that's going to work out and how it's ultimately going to, work in the Beavers' favor or against it. It's a nice quirk. The Pac-12 had been pretty dormant the last couple years, and obviously Oregon State went through 2 years of the independent quasi-wasteland, as I like to call it, and it's nice to have a conference and have some support in that regard. And credit to Teresa Gould and what her staff have been able to do, kind of rebuilding the pieces of this conference after. Well, let's see. I mean, what's a good analogy, folks? If Larry Scott flooded the house, George Kliavkoff set it on fire, right? So, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say, Larry Scott maybe did some damage to the foundation, all those kind of things. But make no mistake, it was, George Kliavkoff who was overseeing, the whole demise and the whole real collapse of the whole thing. So now that we're back, and I'll say, the last couple of years have been, it's, as an Oregon State supporter, it's been a challenge kind of seeing what was going to happen, how this was going to come together. And I'll tell you one thing, it's really nice to see a Pac-12 schedule together, a new conference, a conference that's going to continue to look to add more opponents, and a conference with a solid TV network that's going to have, the CW, CBS, Paramount, and then USA Network. I like where that's going as well. So ultimately, way too early to determine any kind of expectations. Very famously this last year before the wheels fell off, I thought the absolute floor for Oregon State was to go 6-6 or 7-5, and they proceeded to have such a bad year that Trent Bray was shown the door. They go 2-10, and it gets put down in the forgettable moments of Oregon State football history. So because of that, I'm not going to jump the gun and say, hey, bold declarations about what Jamarcus Shepard and his staff are going to be able to do, but I'll say this. The Beavers lost, by my account, let's just go on the conservative side, 2 games last year by poorly, shoddy special teams play that should have just been, most college football teams would not have had such poor play. So if you look at it like that, where it's like Oregon State on talent was probably closer to what we saw the year before, which was a 5-7 team under Trent Bray, that's probably what I would, if you were to ask me point blank what kind of talent Oregon State had this last year, knowing what we know now, I think at the minimum, this team probably had 4 or 5 win talent. Could they have won more? Absolutely. But Oregon State was completely undisciplined this last year and, had issues across the board and issues on the recruiting trail, issues internally. And that's why we saw a full sale cleaning of the house as far as a new staff and everything with it. But I'll say this. The momentum with Oregon State and Jamarcus Shepard is palpable. All I would say, if you don't believe me, is to go on X, look up Beaver Football, and see some of the clips that they've released from their offseason workouts. It's night and day difference. Now, is that going to wholeheartedly change Oregon State's fortunes? Are they going to, suddenly become a rich school and suddenly become an NIL massive factor? No. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Oregon State can thrive in their lane. And I've thought about this for a long time. And, Jonathan Smith had them in a great spot. And I don't particularly love to bring up that revisionist history because Oregon State is largely in this position because of Jonathan Smith seeking the grass being greener elsewhere. And again, as I like to say, and I've learned with time, folks, your boy is, pushing 30. And I look and I'm like, it stinks because I think if Oregon State and Jonathan Smith hadn't had that situation and he just ushered them through that kind of independent area, I don't think the bottom would have fell out for the Beavers the way that it did. But at the same token, like I've said to everybody, listening for quite some time, if, in the case of Jonathan Smith, if somebody came to you at your job, different employer, and said, hey, I'm going to give you probably double, and let's just say conservatively double and then guarantee a whole lot of millions of dollars, who is going to sit there and say, no, I don't need more money? And if you are saying that right now, listening in the car or wherever you are, you're probably fooling yourself because, again, it's that loyalty versus everything else. And, you can make that argument, how much money does a person need and all that. But, as I look at it now, it stinks that Oregon State is kind of where they are because the Trent Bray era post Jonathan Smith did not go well. Jonathan Smith, he certainly didn't get the last laugh as he got let go at Michigan State. That's the beauty of guaranteed contracts, folks, because gosh, I should have been a coach. I mean, you think about it. You get told to not come into work anymore, but then you're owed a whole lot of money after that. Seems like a pretty darn good thing to be an ex-football coach, especially with the kind of figures they got. But all that to say is Oregon State is not that far removed, folks. I've said this a while. It was just 2 years ago, 2 football seasons ago, that Oregon State was in a top 15 matchup with Washington at Reser Stadium. That was real. That was palpable. And that's not to say that, like, Oregon State, I don't know what their ceiling is in this new, ever-evolving world of NIL and everything else, but I think Oregon State can certainly be a factor, and I know they can be a factor in the new Pac-12 conference. Will it necessarily be this next year with the way the schedule works out? We'll maybe get Ryan Harlan's thoughts on that as he's going to be joining us next here on the Rip City Drive. We'll go ahead and take a quick break, and as we come back, we'll be catching up with Ryan Harlan, senior writer from BeaversEdge.com, and getting Ryan's thoughts on a whole host of Beaver-related things. You get the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter here on a Tuesday. More. You get the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter here on a Tuesday. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon. Brendan Slaughter here with you. Pleased to welcome back to the program a good friend and colleague of mine, Ryan Harlan, a senior writer at Beaver's Edge, back here on the Rip City Drive. Ryan, I feel like we've kind of talked across many hours today. What's going on, my brother?
Oh, not much. I mean, yeah, didn't I just talk to you earlier in the day today about what we're going to talk about today?
We did.
I mean, I feel like that was what I was going to be teed up for this Tuesday afternoon.
Oh yeah, no, it's one of those busy days, and you know how it goes, Ryan. We're just like one thing flexes into the other. You were telling me about your couple radio hits today, things you needed to do, and like we recorded our podcast this morning, and again, you can check out the full extended podcast version over at beaversedge.com. But Ryan, let's go ahead and start just first things first with some football, and that was the Beavers and Jamarcus Shepard have rounded out the staff with Jose Amalu as defensive tackles coach and Mark Hagan as DL coach and defensive run game coordinator. Two expected hires if you've been following Beavers Edge, and Ryan Harlan over at the damn board. But Ryan, your thoughts on Shep finally putting a bow tie on the staff?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that was kind of a welcome surprise a little bit was the adding of Jose Amalu to the staff, being in such a specialized role of coaching defensive tackles. And that's not to say that was, caught me off guard or unexpected or a bad thing. It was just something that was kind of interesting, of maybe an indicator that defensive coordinator Mike McIntyre might have a more specialized defensive scheme than initially anticipated. And it does a good thing as well, too, because Hagan would have to coach at least 11 to 12 guys potentially in that room, and being able to get some more individualized attention with the defensive tackles and having Sam Malu in, I think there's a really big benefit and positive addition to that staff. And then also, too, I'm really curious to see exactly how Hagan plans to use his defensive linemen and bridge those gaps with in the run game, being able to cause some fits there with, run protection, because that was an issue for Oregon State last year in terms of stopping the run at times. And to me, I feel like those are two welcome additions of one coach that's been around before, gives you, the Polynesian connection as well on staff. And then also, too, a guy like Hagan, who's developed a lot of defensive linemen to go on to the next level, like George Karlaftis while at Purdue. So I think those two are going to be really welcome additions, I think, to that position group, and also just rounding out the rest of a pretty experienced staff for the most part on the defensive side of the ball for Jamarcus Shepard in year one.
Absolutely, and a couple things just to follow up with that. But right off the bat, I mean, you all got to know. Talking to Ryan Harlan, he definitely knows what's up with George Karlaftis, because Ryan's the biggest Chiefs fan that I know, folks. But kind of to dip back into it a little bit further, Ryan, kind of into the Oregon State history a little bit. I can certainly remember, Jose Amalu being at Oregon State. I can remember both of his sons, Isaac and Andrew, playing for Oregon State. Obviously, Isaac's still in the NFL, making moves there. But I remember the quality of player that Jose Amalu was able to recruit, and I just want to highlight a guy like Stephen Paya, who, was just a dominant force as like a defensive tackle. And you talked about the Polynesian connections there too, Ryan. I think this is a good hire at a good time, and fitting with Shepard's mold. This is somebody who was on staff at Oregon State when they had some of the peak of their success under Mike Riley, which is what Jamarcus Shepard's wanting to tap back into.
Yeah, that level of excellence and just standard that was kind of fell off a little bit these past two seasons. I think, having a guy that's been around a little bit, not just the Oregon State side, but it's been around in, college football and, developing guys to go on to the next level, I think is just really big in general, of being able to have that as a resource, in addition to having, Mike McIntyre as well on that side of the ball, like two experienced coaches that have been around a lot of football in their time, I think is really a benefit for Shepard starting out in year one, and really being able to shore up that side of the ball where, Shepard is not as, have like football heavy knowledge on the defensive side. It's more on the offensive side that Shepard has that deep football knowledge in. So really, I like just that hire in general of you're leaning on a lot of experience, and that ties back into what Shepard was wanting that side of the ball to look like in his introductory press conference.
Absolutely, and it's definitely been an exercise in patience, and I'll give Beaver fans some credit, Ryan, because there was certainly a lot of, how many times in the last 2 weeks just at Beaver's Edge had we, prior to Hagan and Seumalo being announced, where it's like, hey, is this guy still coming? Is this guy still coming? And I'll say this, Ryan, despite the Beavers having gone 2-10 last year, the passion is still there for this football program. And then I just mentioned before you came on, I said, if you don't believe me and you still think Oregon State football is in the dumps, what have you, Ryan, I was telling everyone, I'm like, go on Beaver Football X, and you've tweeted a couple times, Ryan, you're like, gonna go run through a wall, be right back. And I don't think you're alone there. I think, if you haven't heard the kind of motivational speaker and the way that Jamarcus Shepard can get his team fired up, go check out some of the videos Beaver Football has posted.
Oh yeah, those videos. I mean, like, to be quite honest with you, Brendan, I'm like, hey, can Jamarcus Shepard be my personal hype man while in the gym, please? Like, is that too much to ask for? But like, no, like, just hearing, kind of the feelings around it, around him and the program so far, like, guys are responding really well to that, and to me, that's really kind of a positive and encouraging sign early on, and it's hard not to get fired up about that when you hear that. And I mean, for me, as somebody that like thrived off of that as a student athlete in high school, like those kind of motivational things, it's like it really wants you to like go through a wall for Shepard and go to battle for him. And I think that's what those players are starting to adopt that early on if you watch those videos on X. So yeah, like I think it's a good thing. It's so far to hear that. It's just now you got to see that play out through spring, through fall camp, and then getting into the season, because it's easy to remain high on it when you haven't played any games so far. It's another thing to, when you have played games, how do those guys still respond? Are they still responding at that level from what you see in the video? Because I think that's going to be really telling going forward here. And to me, at least so far in the offseason, Shepard is winning the offseason so far with that. So to me, I like it. We'll just got to see, got to see more and how he is at practice when spring football practices start up here soon.
Oh, yeah. And to Ryan's point, folks, like we've kind of teased about, sometime a little less than a month from now, if you're looking for Oregon State spring football coverage, second week of March, you may not be disappointed. Again, catching up with Ryan Harland, Beaver's Edge senior writer, my good friend and confidant. Again, you can check out some of our recent coverage over at beaversedge.com. But back to just kind of some final thoughts with football, Ryan, before we transition and talk a little Beaver baseball. Overall thoughts on the schedule, and we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier in the day, but just kind of now that you've been able to kind of adjust with it and kind of sit with it a little bit. Overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, how tough do you think this schedule is for Jamarcus Shepard and this new look staff and players in year one?
I'd say it's about maybe an 8, 7.5 or so.
Yeah.
At least in the, overall. But if you look at that 3-game stretch to start out the season, I mean, that is probably one of the tougher stretches out there of, starting out the season on the road at Houston, come back home to play Texas Tech, and then you still remain at home to play an FCS powerhouse in Montana, albeit you just have to see who replaces Bobby Hawk there at Montana in order to kind of know where they'll be at. But that's not a pushover FCS by any stretch of the means either. So it's really, something where I think this schedule is going to be really tough early. If you can at least go 2-2 because you'll have the game at UTEP, that's a win in my book. If you manage to escape that stretch out being 500, I really don't expect them to win against Texas Tech. Houston is probably I'm going to give it to them, at least in that matchup there. Ideally, you should beat Montana. but that's also something that is, not guaranteed either, because Montana's not too far removed from being able to beat an FBS opponent. And, but like, I really do think though that while it's tough to start out the stretch, if you can be competitive and you can show, linear progress, right, of this is the identity of what this team is going to be, and improve on that each and every single week, that will eventually translate into wins. And I think a, moment of like, okay, there are some favorable matchups there of, getting some teams at home in your place. I mean, you get Wazoo at your place, you get Texas State there. You travel on the road, though, to Boise and Fresno State, which will be tough. But, I really think that with kind of how the schedule shakes out, if you're able to get 6 wins out of that slate of games in a year where, you won 7 in total. Well, sorry, 2 years of winning 7 in total. Like, yeah, I'd take that. I'd take that as like a, for a postseason after kind of 2 disappointing middle of the pack kind of year in 24, then disappointing year last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, it's, I mentioned it just before you came on, Ryan, and I said, it's, we're all, guilty of recency bias, right? And it's like, you have to just think, in terms of football seasons, it was only 2 football seasons ago that Oregon State hosted a top 15 matchup between 2 top 15 teams at Reser Stadium when they played Washington. And the great irony is Jamarcus Shepard was on that Washington staff. But it just kind of shows how quickly, because you talked about 2024, I think the Beavers left some meat on the bone there. We think they could have won more than 5 games. And then this last year, the bottom fell out, right? And you talk about, a staff change, all the things. But as you and I have discussed, pure talent for talent, we felt that the Beavers were more talented than 2 wins this last year. But the lack of discipline, the special teams issues, I mean, it was just a comedy of errors this last year, Ryan.
Yeah, the special teams, one of the worst units in college football last year. I mean, just no other way to put it other than horrific performances. There are several games that if your special teams were average, you probably win those. Sam Houston being one of those games in particular. That was really something that I had heard that was really much kind of an issue. And I don't think that, Trent Bray obviously could have righted the ship with the way that was kind of going behind the scenes from what I had heard. But, I think with Shepard coming in, you get a fresh start of the program. And also too, with the way that, they're hiring a bunch of these assistants, I think it's something that is really an attention to detail and getting back to that level and that standard from a few years ago in 2023 and being able to compete at such a high level, because when you're not doing the little things right, you're shooting yourself in the foot, that will trump, talent level any day of the week. And I think that's something that the staff is really trying to ingrain into these guys, is like doing your 1/11th of your job there and being able to fall in line for that and being able to execute at such a high level, because that was really missing all last year. And you could see it from where it looked like there'd be some positive momentum, and then Beavers take a step back and then take a step forward and then a step back. And there wasn't just really any consistency on either side of the ball. And ultimately, when you don't execute on the field, coaches get fired, right? And you have the season that you did last year. So it's a blank slate now, and you just kind of have to wait and see, and be cautiously optimistic as to what exactly this team is going to look like, what the identity is going to be on both sides of the ball, and kind of what Shepard wants this team to be in year 1 of his tenure in Fort Vallis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm excited. I think I would agree, Ryan. I think there's some cautious optimism. We're just going to have to ultimately see how quickly things come together, how the new pieces fit in. I mean, we know the Beavers had some issues in several position groups last year, and it's too early. It's simply too early to know what kind of team is, and even beyond, Texas Tech, Ryan, who I assume is going to buy another really good roster this offseason. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with a lot of teams on the schedule to an extent. But catching up with Ryan Harlan, senior writer over at BeaversEdge.com here on the Rip City Drive. Just a couple more questions for you, Ryan. Let's switch gears to baseball. And Mitch Canham's squad started the year down in Surprise. They are 3-1 after their first 4 games. What are kind of some of your big takeaways from the Beavers as they try to march back to Omaha? Because certainly, Ryan, with the struggles of the football team, and then, I think Beaver fans are really wanting to cling on to baseball and hope they can do another postseason run this year. How are you seeing that group come together so far?
Yeah, the biggest kind of takeaway that I have is the lineup is kind of starting to take a little bit of shape. The offensive identity is starting to take shape a little bit. You got to see a little bit of the small ball approach that Canham and the rest of the staff were kind of tweaking in kind of real time, because you returned 3 starters from last year and you kind of overhaul everything. So it's not going to be perfect right off the bat. And I think that's the biggest thing I think a lot of Beaver fans need to understand. It's this team's going to have some growing pains early. It's just sticking through with them and being able to ultimately get to the end goal, which is the top 8 seed, and being able to host both a regional and a super regional. So that group is kind of coming together a little bit. A couple guys, are paying dividends early in their performances. Jacob Galloway, the transfer from Texas A&M, the former USC catcher, really looking like one of the better bats so far in that lineup in this kind of retooled group, along with AJ Singer. The pitching staff, Whitney and Kleine, both kind of, what you're going to get out of them each and every appearance. Like, they are who, we thought they are, kind of a deal. And really, in terms of the rest of the staff, there's a couple, growing pains that they need to, I think, work through a little bit. Some guys weren't quite as sharp as I expected them to be coming out this opening series down in Surprise. But at the same time, though, they were able to make, the pitches when needed to be able to, win those close games against Arizona, Stanford, and then the win against Michigan on Monday. But really, out of that staff, though, Brendan, Trey Morris is a name that I think, a lot of Beaver fans are going to come to know here pretty quickly. Morris was the one who went out on the mound to start that Monday game, picked up 6 strikeouts in his Oregon State debut, which for a freshman,
very good.
That is, very good, very impressive. His stuff won't necessarily wow you with like velocity, but he's able to, attack the zone and being able to, fill that up and get, strikes. And to me, that's something that I kind of was hearing that the staff was really high on him throughout, being able to listen to those games on radio, Josh Warden, and that it's easy to see why after a performance like that. So there's a lot of good, I would say, that came out of this week. You go 3-1, but also at the same time, though, plenty of work to, improve upon and get better before you go down to Round Rock this week.
No, absolutely. And again, Oregon State baseball back in action in Round Rock this weekend. A couple other things, just 2 questions left for you. Ryan Harlan here on the Rip City Drive. Excited to catch up with Ryan. Ryan, spring football, as we mentioned, obviously on the horizon. If you were to nail down one thing that you're most looking forward to seeing, what would it be?
Honestly, if I had to nail it down to one thing, I really... It kind of goes maybe as 2 things, but I'm going to combine it into one. I think just schematically what the offense and defense might look like for Jamarcus Shepard in year one, like kind of what Mitch Dahlin and Mike McIntyre want to do on those 2 sides, because I think that's going to be really telling of how those 2 sides of the ball coexist with one another, and how really, they're going to, approach attacking teams this year, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, because we didn't get a clear identity of, at least on the offensive side of the ball, we didn't get a clear identity of what a Ryan Gunderson offense looks like. And I'd really, really like to know what a Mitch Dolan offense looks like, because I think if we know that, that gives a lot of, I think, Beaver fans a lot more ease of like, okay, this is exactly what this team is going to do, rather than hear, oh, it's a fun offense, we're going to do this or this, and not give a clear, like, this is what we're going to run the ball and open up the passing game. Well, like that, like just a clear, definitive identity that I want to hear. So it kind of goes maybe as two things, but I'm going to combine it as to one.
Hey, man, we make rules as we go along, Ryan. There are no rules. And again, catching up with Ryan Harlan here on the Rip City Drive. Last question for you, Ryan. Oregon State women's basketball still kind of jockeying for position in the WCC standings with a few games left to go. How confident are you that Scott Rueck will have his team in a position to be a factor in the WCC tournament and ultimately push to get back to the big dance?
I'm still confident in this group, because at the end of the day, like, really for where Rueck's teams shine the best is getting to the postseason. And to me, when I asked Rueck after the San Francisco game about because even though that was a win, there was still, Rueck was saying that there was still plenty of room to improve. And I asked him what that looks like. And he said, well, we're always looking to improve and constantly get better. And that happens each and every single game. That happens throughout the course of the season. And we do that up until the last moment, to where we can't talk to one another or play with one another and coach together as a staff. And that tells me that I think even with this little bump in the road that they had of that 3-game stretch, where, sometimes that's just basketball at the end of the day, that this group is able to, do what they need to do and execute at a high level enough to get back into a prime spot to run through the tournament and be able to get back into the big dance, into March Madness. And as a wise man once said, we sleep in May, but if you cover Oregon State, it's more like we sleep in July, as a wise man myself who once said that. So.
Oh, it's so accurate, Ryan. Nobody sleeps in May when you got Oregon State baseball on the horizon, and obviously we'll be keeping our eyes locked to Oregon State women's basketball down the stretch as well. Ryan, I appreciate the heck out of your time today, man. Have a good rest of your night. We'll talk soon, and thanks for joining me here on the Rip City Drive, brother.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on as always. Thank you.
That's Ryan Harlan. You can find his work at Beaver's Edge. He is a senior writer over there. You can also find him on X at Ryan_Harlan7. He is the best, man. I love working with Ryan. We're going to take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up the 4 o'clock hour, getting you guys ready for the 5 o'clock hour. And don't go anywhere. 5 o'clock Trailblazers Ticket Tuesday. I got a pair of tickets to give you. Make sure you stay locked in. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon. We went a little long with Brian Harlan last segment, so quick little segment here, but mostly just want to let you guys know, make sure to call us at 5 o'clock, or rather wait for me at 5 o'clock when we tell you guys when to call. We got a pair of Trailblazers tickets to give away. Minnesota and Portland coming up. Make sure you call. Wait and listen in. Top of the hour, Brendan Slaughter here with the Rip City Drive. Trailblazers Ticket Tuesday coming up next. What's good, Rip City? Brendan Slaughter here for the Rip City Drive. Early reports are that Seattle Seahawks will not franchise tag running back Super Bowl MVP Kenny Walker. Walker is set to become an unrestricted free agent, and the Seahawks and GM John Schneider have used the tag just twice in their illustrious time together, so a departure for Kenneth Walker could be imminent from the Seahawks. The Portland Trailblazers return to action on Friday out of the All-Star break, hosting Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. I will have Blazers game day starting at 5 o'clock from Moda Center, filling in for Chris Burkhardt. Coming up here on the big show in about 20 minutes, we're going to be joined live in studio from Michael Holton, Trailblazers TV and radio analyst. Excited for the conversation with Holton on hoops. Much, much more to come here on the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon with Brendan Slaughter. And we're back here on the Rip City Drive. Final hour of the show here on a Tuesday afternoon. Thanks for sticking with us here on the Rip City Drive. Got a lot of exciting things to get into here on the Rip City Drive final hour. As we mentioned, Michael Holton coming up in about 20 minutes. But the big thing now, Trailblazers Ticket Tuesday, folks. If you are near your phones, definitely get to them now, as we are going to be giving away a pair of tickets for the Portland Trailblazers versus the Minnesota Timberwolves on February 24th. That's coming up just around the bend. I believe that's actually, let's go ahead and take a look. That is a week from today, folks. So that is a week from today, next Tuesday. Anthony Edwards and company in town. The Blazers just faced the Timberwolves before the break and fell in Minnesota. Blazers looking for a little revenge. And I want to send you to Moda Center. Fire away now. I will take caller number 8 in honor of Denny Avdia's number. Caller number 8, 503-248-0620. Again, caller number 8 right now can get a pair of tickets to the Minnesota Timberwolves on the 24th. 503-248-0620. Once again, 503-248-0620. If you want a pair of tickets to the Minnesota Timberwolves and Portland Trailblazers on February 24th, that is a week from today, call now. Rip City Drive, Brendan Slaughter wants to give you some tickets to the Trailblazers and Minnesota. Thank you much for the Rip City Drive. All right, folks, let's go ahead and shift gears here a little bit. Last hour was pretty Oregon State heavy for all my Beaver fans out there. Great conversation with Ryan Harlan. Check out his work, BeaversEdge.com. He's a senior writer there. We didn't get a chance to fully dive into it, but Ryan has an in-depth recap of Oregon State baseball, their action to play this last weekend. The Beavers went 3-1. He's got a great breakdown at Beavers Edge. You can check that out. You can join for just $1 and check out Ryan's coverage and much, much more. Additionally, we talked about the Beavers football schedule. Opportunities abound, but tough. Ryan rated on like an 8 on the scale of toughness, largely because of that non-conference. But nevertheless, that will be a challenge for the Beavers to ultimately overcome. But shifting gears now back to the Portland Trailblazers, I want to circle back to some audio that we played back in the first hour, and that was Denny Avdia following the All-Star game. Denny obviously was Portland's All-Star this year, and he spoke to the media following the All-Star game.
Sean.
Denny, with this being your first All-Star experience, was it important to you to have it be a kind of more of a competitive game, given some of the criticisms about the All-Star game the past few years?
For sure, I think it was competitive. People really brought their effort and try to play it hard. Some players took more shots than others, so, can't really control that. But, you're just out there trying to compete, we don't play together all the time, so we're trying to figure each other out. But we tried. Yeah, it was fun.
Denny, do you think the world format brought out more from you guys in terms of just bringing more juice than normal?
I think it brought more from the stripes, actually. they were going at it. So, I think it brought some competitiveness with it, and it's a fun format, and it shows how the game went global, which is amazing to see. and I hope it's even gonna expand and like people about to understand it. So like fun watching the All-Star game. It's gonna be a little bit more competitive. Yeah, try to bring it back.
Sorry, Joe on the left.
Denny, you said it over here. Other way. There you go.
Oh,
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, hiding.
Yeah. You said it was a long weekend, but now reflecting back on the 3 days, did the experience live up to your expectations? Can you just elaborate on the highlights and what you enjoyed?
Yeah, just all the obligations you have to do. Whether it's your shoe brand, your like fans, the NBA itself. It's just fun to be around this league, these people, like great staff all around, great planning of the All-Star weekend. It was hectic, but it was fun. I was really enjoying just the experience, especially when it's your first time. You embrace everything a little better. But I hope I can be here for many years to come. And yeah, it wasn't so bad.
Ramona, back right.
Hi. Denny, was Victor really as competitive as it seemed like? And we saw the block there.
Yeah.
We saw him get mad at the lack of defensive rotation towards the end of the game there. What was he really like in there?
We kind of saw Victor it was really competitive, so we just try to give him the ball and like go to work, man. Like it's because we saw he was really into it. So I mean, we're just there. We were just there for each other, honestly. And Victor was cooking. He was playing good. So just feed him the ball. It was fun.
Denny, you said like this game brought out the juice in everybody. Would you like the world to run back against USA, and would you like this to stay for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I trust the NBA. They're pretty creative and having ideas of like spicing it up with the games. But yeah, it was pretty competitive, and I like it. Since the game got so global, it is really fun to watch the world versus US. But yeah, it's a cool format, I must say.
That was Portland Trailblazers forward Denny Avdia following the All-Star game. We got a couple other All-Star clips I want to play, most notably a couple things from Damian Lillard, too. But again, I just think more than anything, it was awesome to see Denny get that notoriety on the national stage. Obviously, Denny didn't light up the scoreboard in both games, finished with 5 points. But, Denny's rise this year has been one of the most fun things I could possibly have imagined coming in and covering this Trailblazers season. I think we all thought Denny had another gear, to go, but necessarily he didn't, thinking it and then seeing it over the course of, such a large sample size, it's been awesome to see what Denny can do. I'm excited now that he's healthy, had some time off, and obviously going to lead this charge for the Trailblazers down the stretch as they've got 26 games left. They've got the easiest schedule in the NBA per, strength of schedule and what have you. And to me, that's opportunities. Opportunities abound for this team to make up some ground and for this team to ultimately try to make up some games on Golden State and Phoenix. I mean, I think catching Minnesota for the 6th seed as they sit 34-22, that's, 7 games in the loss column ahead of the Blazers. That could be a little tougher, but I'm still not going to say impossible. Phoenix right now, 6 games in the loss column ahead of the Blazers, and then Golden State 3 games in the loss column ahead of the Blazers. But as we've discussed, getting in, if you're going to be in the play-in, getting back to that 7-8 range is extremely favorable because you only need to win 1 game to be in the playoffs. And then ultimately, if you lose that game, you then play the winner of the 9-10. So with, again, just needing 1 game to be the 8th seed. So I think the opportunities are certainly still there. And I go back to the conversation we had with Keith Smith earlier in the program where I think it'd be a double dose of goodness for the Trailblazers where it's like, sure, do you love their odds if they come in as a 7 or 8 seed and have to face Oklahoma City or San Antonio right out the gate? No, not necessarily. But I think for this team and this group and on their developmental path, being able to get to the postseason, get that taste of experience is going to be huge for this squad. And then, ho-hum, I think it's also just an awesome kind of added benefit that, yeah, by way of doing that, you would be out of the lottery. Chicago would get your pick wherever it lands, 15, 16, and then that obligation's gone. We don't have to worry about Chicago anymore and that, not even mysterious, just that phantom pick from the ghost of Larry Nance that has just kind of followed this franchise around for many, many years would finally be alleviated. So I'm kind of rooting for that. I want Portland to make the playoffs, get that key experience. Maybe they get a game or 2 from Oklahoma City, San Antonio, and ultimately get that key experience, wash that pick, and move on from there. But nevertheless, too, a couple other things from the All-Star break. This was Damian Lillard winning the three-point contest.
Needs this to tie. Oh! No! Booker had it in his hand. Goodness. Instead, Damian Lillard's a 3-time three-point champ. Wow, it was his to lose, and it wasn't meant to be. He missed the final three. Oh, his money rack, his placement. He had 4 shots at it. Oh my goodness. And Damian Lillard, a 3-time champion, along with Larry Bird and Craig Hodges.
I could listen to that all afternoon long. Again, shout out to Noah Eagle and Reggie Miller and company. That was fun. That was awesome on Saturday to watch Dame win the three-point contest. But as I mentioned, and as you guys heard there, I said earlier, not to take anything away from Dame, because I think Dame was awesome, and to have Dame out there and win the thing is awesome. But the way that they said that, Devin Booker's, it was his to lose. When Devin Booker had, I can't remember exactly how many points it was. He was entering his money rack, which, he picked it there, his placement, and it was Devin Booker's contest to lose. Devin Booker had a nice smile on his face afterwards. He knew he kind of let one slip away, and it was ultimately Dame that was able to get the win. And this was Damian Lillard talking about some of the All-Star events down in L.A. this weekend.
You're in this event because you went to the NBA and said, if you need me, I'll be here. Why are you committed to making this weekend be the best it can be?
I think this weekend is about the fans of our league, everybody that represent our league, and the stars of the league. So, people want to see us come out here and compete. They want to see us go against each other. That's for three-point, dunk contests, even in the game. That's what they want to see, is the players that they recognize most come out and be willing to lose, be willing to compete. And I haven't been out there on the floor, so this was an opportunity for me to come out and get some competition, like I said. And it was fun. I'm glad I did it.
That was Dame following the three-point contest. And again, for those of you who maybe didn't catch, were surprised it was at 2 o'clock, and it caught me by a little bit of a surprise too. It was awesome. Getting to sit there and watch Dame, outlast Devin Booker, outlast Knipple. I mean, it was awesome. And I think I'm not the only, Blazer supporter who thought that. And it was, it just felt like the all-star vibes. I mean, between Dame winning the three-point contest, Denny, being Denny and being in the world part of the all-star game. Then you add in Donovan Clingan and Young Hansen also being in the Rising Stars contest. I mean, we're going to talk about it here in a few minutes with Michael Holton, but it really seemed like it was a trailblazer kind of all-star weekend as far as the representation. And I think that's pretty awesome. I mean, we talk about a league that's, so much about exposure and this and this and that. Dame winning the three-point contest, rocking that Blazers jersey, not the worst thing in the world. Not the worst thing in the world at all. All right, we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we're going to have Michael Holton on Hoops, live in studio. Excited to talk some hoops with Michael. Blazers All-Star Game, what he thought about the three-point contest, much, much more here on the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter. Michael Holton, when we come back. Welcoming you back into the Rip City Drive here on a Tuesday afternoon. Very pleased to welcome on to the program, live in studio, Michael Holton, Trailblazers TV and radio analyst. Michael, our first interview together. Very happy to have you in studio, man. Thank you for coming in.
No, I always enjoy coming in and seeing Radio World. It looks like Radio World is changing.
It is. Yeah, lots of changes. We're kind of adjusting in the studios here. We've moved studios a little bit, some movements going on out there, but happy to have you in, Michael. And first off, just to start off, how's it been for you having a couple days off for the All-Star break, getting to kind of take your breath a little bit?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been a fun season up to this point. I think the team has really displayed its improved talent over the last couple of years. And when the season starts, you just kind of hit the ground running and you don't lift your head up. So when you get an All-Star break, you just get a couple of days, you kind of reflect, you exhale, and you look at your perspective on what has occurred, where the team is, and you look at what's going to happen here down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, too, Michael, where obviously we're going to kind of get into the Trailblazers, the stretch run, the 26 games left, but I got to start with the All-Star weekend. And it just seemed to me, beyond, the awesome news, because I'm sure you, like many of us, were kind of surprised to see that Dame was going to be out there and going to be in the three-point contest. And for him to go out there, not just play well, Michael, but win the darn thing. Like, I'm still giddy about it.
Yeah, no, it was exciting when it was announced that he was going to be invited.
Right.
And then his comments about being excited, you just kind of raised your eyebrows like, wow, we're going to see Dame in a uniform this season. And then we saw Dame. I mean, a competitive Dame that is serious about the business of basketball, about his craft. And that was exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where, Michael, for us media who have gotten a chance to, maybe see Dame, dribble a basketball at the facility or things like that. But for all the Blazer fans that were like, hey, it's All-Star weekend, let's tune on the three-point contest, and you see Dame looking that well in a Blazer jersey, it just felt like all was right in the world. And then, a part of me was like, okay, is he for sure like 100%? Like, I don't want to do anything to, push him back at all. And he just goes out there and, is the Dame we remember.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate in that I've seen every minute he's played in a Blazer uniform, and he's been the same. He's been professional. He's been dedicated. He's been disciplined. He's been competitive. He's always exuded leadership. So there was nothing surprising about the three-point shooting performance. I think the surprise was we didn't expect to see Dame in a uniform this year.
Yeah, I mean, that alone, like it, I think I posted something afterwards just on social. It's like, man, I can't wait to get this guy back on the court, because I think like with a lot of fans, you're looking at all that, you see him win, you're like, oh man, he looks pretty good out there. Like, we all know he's not going to play this season, but that gives me some big-time excitement, Michael, heading into next year, just kind of looking ahead, even though you don't want to sell this season short, because what Dame brings seems to kind of complement what the Blazers need right now.
Yeah, it's perspective is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversations centered around what you just alluded to. I don't think anybody's looking past the next game or this season, but being down in LA for All-Star Weekend and just hearing the chatter, so to speak, around the Trailblazers, around Denny Avia, around what next year's team could possibly look like, what the style of play would look like. There's just a buzz in the air.
There is. And it wasn't just Dame, because obviously we've talked this long, Michael. We haven't even talked about Denny, who was the all-star for the Blazers. And then, I got to throw in Donovan Clingan and Young Hansen, being able to have 4 Blazers repping an All-Star weekend. I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, but that kind of seems like a big deal for a franchise that, had a couple years on the lower spectrum and now kind of getting some momentum back, and I like where it's going.
Yeah, it's a big deal for a number of reasons, and hopefully what I'm getting ready to say is not a downer, but I found myself feeling this way as I was processing the Blazers having, 4 guys or 3 guys? 3 guys at All-Star Weekend performing in various – 4 guys. Yeah. 4 guys in performing in various events. And some of it came from one of the things I heard Denny Avia say. And he said, hey, this is exciting. He said, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
And then he kind of went on to kind of unpack it being a lot. And I thought about that. I'm going, wow. after the Trailblazers' last game, I think the team got on a plane and flew home. I think those 4 guys got on a charter plane and flew to Los Angeles.
Right.
And they landed, and then I'm sure every minute was scripted from the moment they landed. And it's exciting, but I just kind of want to say this just so I can kind of get it out of my head.
Sure.
I'm like, you win an award, and the reward is you go to All-Star Weekend.
Right.
And then you have to perform.
Right.
I'm going, that's an interesting set of circumstances.
No, I think you're spot on, too. And the other thing of it, too, is, like you said, the Blazers having that matchup with the Jazz, and then, boom, rising stars the next night. You're Donovan Kling and Young Hansen into action, then Dame on Saturday, and what have you. But just for this team, Michael, and the Blazers, and we obviously know they've dealt with some injuries this year, but I think they're, on the back nine as far as starting to get some guys healthy, getting back to probably the healthiest they've been in a while. How important do you think it'll be to have this kind of break for those guys that didn't go to be able to get, a week to kind of put their feet up, for lack of better terms?
Well, I mean, rest is a good thing, and for those guys that didn't get the same amount of rest because they had a chance to participate, that's a part of your experience in the league. When you get to be in the room and in the environment with all-stars and rising stars, it says a lot about your pedigree as an NBA player. And pedigree, to kind of pick up on what you were just saying, I think it's a good thing to say about this season and this team. The competitive pedigree that we've watched with this team through injury adversity has been impressive.
It has. And I think, honestly, I think that's a credit to Tiago Splitter. And the again, we don't need to recale it all, but just the set of circumstances he thought he was walking into this year, the set of circumstances he's in now, the injuries he had to work through. I mean, I don't know, Michael, how many other teams in the NBA could be down at one point. I think it was 5, 6 rotation players at minimum, if not more, and still be kind of playing 500 basketball in the NBA.
Well, it's refreshing the way that this team has played, the way that Tiago and his staff have crafted game plans within the injury adversity, to where every game you felt this team was locked in. You felt the team was on the same page.
Sure.
And during the course of an NBA season, you typically have a couple of nights that aren't your night. And this team has had that experience as well, but not nearly as much as one would have thought, given the adversity of injury and the adversity of the coaching change and the way Tiago came into the job.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's an impossible set of circumstances. That's why I continue to be impressed with Tiago. Switching back to Dame for just a second, Michael, it's one of those things where I am definitely a history buff as far as the NBA goes, and I think while, Dame is not going to go down as the greatest shooter, I think that mantle belongs to Steph, and I think he's earned that, but it's kind of a cool quirk to me that 15, 20 years from now, Michael, they're going to look back and go, it wasn't Steph that won the most three-point contests. It wasn't Clay. As of right now, it's Dame, Larry Bird, and Craig Hodges, elite company, and after the game, Dame was like, hey, I plan to come back and go for number 4 next year. I think that's a cool piece of Dame's legacy that he wants to chase.
There's no doubt about it. And when you look at I don't want to say generational players, but players that have a unique impact on the NBA from a style of play standpoint. And we can go down the list, but let's just talk about the above mentioned names. Steph Curry.
Yeah.
Steph Curry changed the view of what's a good shot.
He did. He did.
And what's in range. Clearly changed that.
Yeah.
I think Dame really impacted what being a clutch player was about. How he was always comfortable with the heavy lifting, and he would say that, when the game is tight or late, I know I need to keep the ball in my hands more. That leadership responsibility in clutch minutes. I think history is going to view Dame as one of the best at that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just adding to Dame's legacy, and I think it's really cool that because we've seen it. I mean, and I'm curious your take on this too, Michael. Some people think it's just showing up and hitting a bunch of 3-point shots, but it's much more than that to win that contest. And the fact that Dame's done it a trio of times now against. We know there are guys that can absolutely tear up the nets in this league, so that's cool.
There's kind of a thing about how guys use the word, I put the work in, I put the work in. We have these cliches. Guys get interviewed after the game.
Yeah.
How are you able to be so confident? Well, I just trust the work.
Right, sure.
We hear these phrases, right? But nobody really quantifies what that means.
Right.
What that put the work in means. And Dame's a guy that in the offseason puts that work in. I mean, goes into the arena, goes into the practice facility and shoots X amount of shots every day from every spot under different conditions, to where 5 or 6 racks of 5 balls is a light lift.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. I mean, it's just fascinating, and it is just to kind of see how, even though, and again, I'm no doctor or expert, but even just less than a year removed from an Achilles injury, Dame's out there doing this. Like, that's impressive to me.
Yeah, and I've never heard an Achilles or really had a lower extremity injury. One of the things I would suspect happens, though, is you do the thing that you're limited to doing more than you normally do it.
Sure, yeah.
So if you can shoot sitting in a chair, then,
Right.
you take hundreds of shots sitting in a chair. And if you can only shoot stationary shots, if you can only shoot. And so I can only imagine how Dame has maximized what he's been able to do.
Yeah.
But the thing he's been able to do is shoot the ball.
Right. And it was refreshing. I couldn't have been the only kind of Blazer supporter who was like, this is awesome to see what Dame can ultimately do. And catching up with Michael Holton here on Rip City Radio 620. Appreciate your time, Michael. Just a few more questions for you. Let's go ahead and switch gears to kind of the second half now. And we know that, I call it the second half. Everyone seems to call it the second half. It's really not the second half at all. There's only 26 games left for the Trailblazers. But Michael, per strength of schedule, they have the easiest strength of schedule of all NBA teams left. How much can you kind of, I don't want to say read into it, but how much can you kind of lean into that and kind of be able to build up some momentum and some runs down the stretch?
Yeah, I think when the season starts and you look at your schedule, you look at all of those things. I mean, I think through the first 20 games, they had the toughest schedule.
Right.
And so you look at all of those things. You don't talk about it a whole lot. You don't say, well, when we get to this point, because of the schedule, we're going to win X percentage of our games. You deal with the game that's in front of you. But let's look at the NBA calendar as a part of this answer to this question. There's 3 or 4 different dates in the calendar that are significant, in my opinion, because of the distractions that they invite. The first, I think, is when non-guaranteed contracts are guaranteed, right? And the second is the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Then there's the All-Star break. And then now there's the buyout market.
Right.
So there's a series of times where the transactional balloon or cloud hangs over your locker room. That can be a distraction, and that can pull your team in different directions.
Sure.
So now let's look at this team and how it's managed the injury adversity and how it's presented itself as being collectively able to have game plan discipline every single night,
sure,
regardless of who's available. This team has, I think, credibly displayed that. Now you look at that schedule, you look at the improved health, you look at the discipline, the game plan discipline, and there's reason for optimism down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at, and obviously it's not to say Portland's just got a cakewalk the rest of the way. I mean, they opened the All-Star break, with Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets just here on Friday. But, I mean, when you consider the team getting healthier, obviously I think, you get Scoot Henderson back, and I kind of wanted to specifically talk with you on that. I mean, for what Scoot brings, and I think it's kind of hard to quantify at times because, obviously Scoot was out for this whole year, but just when you see him play, like, it's very easy to be like, okay, this is why this guy went, top 3 in a draft, and at one point was like, oh, maybe he would have went number 1 in that draft. Victor obviously rose up to the top there, but at one point, that's where Scoot's tantalizing, athletic ability, the way he's chiseled and can move downhill. I mean, it seems like it's exactly what the Blazers need to have another ball handler right now. What have you kind of seen from Scoot since he's been back, Michael?
Well, I think there's 2 words that pop up in my mind in response to your question and description, and it's competitive physicality. Scoot brings that every night, and it is so important and valued, particularly at that position,
right?
That he can sit down in a chair in front of a ball handler and keep him in front of him, and then he's physical to negotiate screens and those parts of the game where you got to be able to be on balance and be disciplined. And then offensively, he's always a threat because he's in attack mode.
Right.
And so those things you're going to get from Scoot every night. And I think as a young player, and Scoot's still a young player, you can only anticipate the the on-court game management type of IQ things, the scoring, the polishing up of certain skills and reads. It's just something that's going to continue to be a work in progress.
Right. And just for him overall, what do you think maybe he brings to the court, Michael, that maybe the Blazers were missing? Not only when Jrue Holiday was, out and due with injury, but just maybe some things that Scoot can do that Jrue Holiday isn't as good at. And that's understandable considering they're on very different career arcs right now.
Yeah. I think it's hard for me to align those two skill sets
Sure.
at the same position because I think they play the position very differently.
Of course, yeah.
But to your question of what does Scoot bring, what's the uniqueness of Scoot Henderson being on the floor? I think it's his size and physicality.
Yeah.
And I keep coming back to that because when you look at NBA games, and particularly down the stretch of seasons and in games, teams still hunt matchups.
They do.
Right? And you can go back and that's why people attack Luka as not being able to win it. And,
sure.
And people talk about the Lakers because of their defensive liabilities. Well, the reason you hear those narratives is because as the games mean more, those matchups become critical.
Right.
And so now enter Scoot. I don't think there's anybody saying we're attacking Scoot.
Right. I mean, it's a good question, and I think a really good response too, because you talk about maybe less so in the regular season. When you get to the postseason, say a team is top heavy, and we kind of saw that when maybe the Blazers were a little top heavy with like Dame and CJ, where it's like, hey, we're gonna make the other guys beat us, take the ball out of your hand, or at least try to, and we've seen that throughout. But it's like that's one of the things, Michael, that I think impresses me so much about this team, and we're obviously in the early goings of what this team we think is going to be. As they move pieces around in the future, but I really like that this team that Joe Cronin has built is it's versatile. It's not quite even to me like just it's easy lazy comparison to look at like the previous regime to this one, but you look about previously maybe the Blazers were built around two guards that were not the biggest and didn't get the production from the forwards they would like. Now it's kind of flipped where it's like you've got great forward production that you like and you're waiting to see, more guard play coming back into it. And I ultimately like where this team has kind of been built up.
No, I think you make a good point, and I'd like to kind of fill in a couple of the blanks with some historical context, as it relates to Joe Cronin and his staff. And I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a few years ago, there was this thought at the trade deadline that a lot needed to happen. And I thought that same feeling was in the air this year at the trade deadline. And Joe didn't make any significant moves. And he said, you know what? We haven't had a chance to see this group play together.
Agreed.
We want to kind of see what we have. I feel the same way about this team and this trade deadline that, because of health, for the most part, we haven't seen the best of this team together on the floor. And now I sit down and I go, wait a minute. You've got the center position covered and Clingan and Rob Williams III. You've got this base covered. You've got shooting. You've got scoring. You got scoring in isolation. You got guys that can play with pace. All of a sudden, you start checking all of these boxes of the parts.
Yeah.
And then, everybody always likes to say to be a championship caliber team, the total needs to be greater than the sum of the parts. Well, that's what the rest of the season is about.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be exciting down the stretch to see ultimately how Portland plays. But along those lines, Michael, one of the moves Joe Cronin did make, and another kind of what I like to call a low-risk, high reward, high upside move was bringing in Vit Krejci. And I'm curious kind of what you've seen from Vit early on. I know he's still kind of looking for that shooting stroke, but we know he's got that sniper tendency from three. And for a team that shoots a lot of threes like the Trailblazers, I think this was a well-needed addition.
Oh, I agree. I just feel like guys with the Vit Krejci skill set always kill the Blazers.
I mean,
there's always
could be.
this shooter on the other team that we can't seem, to get our arms around.
Yeah.
Right? So that skill set is so important for a number of reasons. One, being able to shoot the three ball consistently well off the catch.
Yeah.
And Vit is more than that. And I think we've seen glimpses, but Vit is able to put it on the deck and be under control as a secondary playmaker and be a threat to get to the rim and to the free throw line. And so those are very, very, very important skill sets.
Yeah, and not to mention, Michael, I think his nickname, Heat Check, being from the Czech Republic as Vit is, I think that's pretty cool. And honestly, you consider how quickly he was thrown into the mix after the trade deadline. Is it a hot take to kind of say that Veet could be a lot more settled in after this All-Star break, now that he kind of has had more time in the offense, more time in the defense, and what have you?
No question. He's not going to be less settled in.
This is true.
Because the nature of being a pro is being able to process information away from the floor. I mean, when you look at the limited amount of practice time NBA teams have now, how do they put a game plan in?
Right.
It's via video. And so Veet has had a lot of opportunity now, and the organization has had a lot of opportunity to think about Veet, his skills, his fit, which sets, what kind of position are we going to put him in, and then how are we going to ramp him up or ramp up his understanding of that within our scheme.
Yeah, I'm certainly very excited to see, more of Veet as time goes on, because I agree with you, Michael. I think he fits the system like a glove. Just last thing for you before we let you go, Michael Holton joining us here on Rip City Radio 620. Brendan Slaughter here as well. What is kind of one or two things, Michael, that you're most looking forward to once we start this last 26 games on Friday against Denver?
Consistently winning.
I think we all would, yeah.
I look at this team and I just think this team is on the launching pad, is chomping at the bit and feeling a sense of relief in terms of health and player availability.
Yeah.
I just think that's a reasonable narrative. And then it's about the opportunity now to perform at your highest level consistently. And coaches like to always talk about, we didn't play well for long enough stretches, or there was a stretch in the game where it got away from us, right? And so one of the things with depth, if you go back to how this team was designed coming out of training camp, was to dictate the terms of engagement with pace based on depth. And I love when Thiago was asked about it midseason when the team's identity had changed.
Yeah.
He was asking, he said, well, when you don't have the depth, you can't play guys short stretches. Now you're playing guys longer stretches, so you can't ask as much from them defensively. And now I think there's going to be this opportunity to get back to the desired identity of three-quarter court pressure, some trapping, and voluntarily rotating your defense to speed up your opponent.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Michael, because I remember early in the season, particularly, even that, I think it's the second or third game when they had Golden State at home and won, and you're seeing Toumani Camara pick up Steph Curry three-quarter court, and you're like, it's game 2 or 3, and we're doing this. So I would certainly like to see that. I'm sure a lot of Blazer fans would as well. And obviously, Michael, I appreciate you coming by and joining us here on the Rip City Drive. It was an awesome conversation, my friend, and certainly looking forward to when we can do it again sometime.
Oh, man, I appreciate the invitation.
It's been great that he is Michael Holton. You can find him Trailblazers TV and radio analyst. Make sure you stay locked into him, Holton on Hoops. Brendan Slaughter coming back, final segment of the Rip City Drive when we come back.